Elden Ring situation is crazy, that changes everything. No trochę tak jest, no. Oglądamy Storma.
Alright, what's going on, guys? The lead up to the release of Elden Ring Nightreign is continuing at full speed. I told you guys there was going to be way too much news about this game to keep up with it all, and that is turning out to be absolutely the case.
W ogóle ciekawa sprawa, mam wrażenie, że marketing Nightreigna jest większy niż Elden Ringa. Nie wiem, czy to jest kwestia tego, że From Software się rozwinęło, ale serio, co chwilę jakieś artykuły, co chwilę jakieś newsy odnośnie konkretnych postaci, przecieki, kontrolowane lub nie, ale mega dużo się dzieje w kontekście tej gry. Wydaje mi się, że to przez to, że ona sama w sobie się aż tak nie broni, w związku z czym chcą ją też napompować marketingowo i przedstawić, że jednak tu jest naprawdę fajny content i warto spróbować. Spoko, ja tam mam przynajmniej o czym gadać. Jaram się Nightreignem, będziemy grać na premierę. 21 dni, moi drodzy, 3 tygodnie i się wpierdzielamy to jak dzik w szyszunie.
Every single day it's something new. So we've got a lot to catch up on, with it being the end of the week. So as we talked about in the last video, From Software have been hosting exclusive events in Japan, offering new previews on Nightreign, as well as the Elden Ring Tarnished Edition, where they've been previewing lots of new details, allowing people to get hands-on with the games, and there we've been learning a ton. In addition to that, we've got new developer interviews to go over today, new details that have kind of slipped through the cracks about both Nightreign and the Elden Ring DLC. We've got more business details from the new Kadokawa report that we've got to go over also, and by the time I get this video out, there's going to be even more. So it's a lot, which is why you want to be subscribed. So if you want to stay up to date on all things Elden Ring and From Software, be sure to hit that button, and now let's get started.
Dokładnie, Storm świetnie mówi o subskrypcji, dlatego ty też ją zostaw. Ale u mnie.
One of the biggest pieces of news from last week was the introduction to Libra, Creature of the
Oglądaliśmy,
Night, one of the 8
jest
Night
reakcja na
Lords that we had
kanale.
not seen yet, and this boss fight is a true evolution of what we've seen out of From Software bosses before.
Wiecie, co jest mega ciekawe? Że na początku właśnie wybierasz buffa, ale z tego, co słyszałem z przecieków, to ten buff działa też na bossa. To jest zajebiste. Zobaczcie, że on trzyma wagę i ogólnie te wszystkie symbolika całego Libry, no nawet nazywa się Libra, no, wszystko jest wagą i równowagą. W związku z czym, jeżeli poprosimy o to, żeby mieć więcej mocy, my będziemy silniejsi, ale boss też. Mega fajne, mega ciekawy zamysł.
There are so many different mechanics going on throughout this fight, and we've really seen nothing like it until now. Now we broke down this fight in
I właśnie to też powoduje, że tego bossa będzie można kilka razy ubić w zupełnie różny sposób. Pewnie ciekawe, czy będą nowe movesety, czy tylko liczbowo będzie się zmieniał, nie?
On throughout this fight, and we've really seen nothing like it until now. Now we broke down this fight in detail in the last video, so if you missed that one, be sure to go watch it. However, there were new details discovered about this boss that were not included in IGN's reveal, and that's because this boss was fightable at the preview events in Japan, and one thing that people noticed while going on the hunt for this boss specifically was that he's not just the Night Lord. So if you look at this image here, you can see that the scale-bearing merchant can be encountered in the overworld, offering what looks to be the same deals that he offers in the final boss fight. And then you can see in the next image that you can end up fighting him outside of the final night. So
Nie rozumiem tego do końca w sumie. Totalnie tego nie czaję. Czemu on się pojawia jako Night Lord też wcześniej? To jest pewnie jakiś koncept fabularny akurat tego bossa, ale...
This looks like a boss that's going to be popping up over and over again throughout your run to go fight him as the final night.
Ale on ogólnie ma bardzo creepy taki voice acting. On jest jakąś taką mistyczną siłą z innego świata, tak brzmi. To jest akurat cool, że przechadzasz się po świecie i losowo możesz spotkać Librę zakapturzonego i mówi ci, no dawaj, chcesz być silniejszy? Spoko. Zawrzyj pakt z diabłem, ale pewnie wszystkie te buffy po drodze będą prowadziły do tego, że z kumulacją tych buffów będziesz potem walczył, nie? Właśnie.
Night Lord, probably offering very good rewards if you do manage to beat him early. So I think that's really cool. It's cool that he's the sort of reoccurring character while you're on that hunt. So
Właśnie, to jest kolejne pytanie. Co jeżeli zabijesz go wcześniej? Co się dzieje na przykład na arenie tego bossa, gdy zabijesz go już raz w open worldzie? Czy będzie po prostu powtórka, czy coś ciekawszego się zadzieje? Tutaj From Software ma duży potencjał, ale zobaczcie, że robią to, o co najbardziej się martwiliśmy, w sensie próbują zaradzić chyba temu, o co najbardziej się martwiliśmy, czyli ilość permutacji, różnorodności tych podejść po to, żeby gra się nie znudziła po tygodniu. I jeżeli w obrębie jednego bossa dzieje się tak, że spotykamy go w różnych miejscach mapy, pewnie losowo, możemy wybierać różne buffy, nie musimy ich wybierać, te różne kumulacje tych buffów potem spotykamy w formie fighta ostatecznego. To nam daje możliwość walczenia z tym bossem kilka razy i nie czucia nudy. To jest giga dobre.
I think that's really cool. It's cool that he's the sort of reoccurring character while you're on that hunt. So that makes a lot more sense why in the original trailer for Nightreign we saw this boss not in a Night Lord's arena.
No on tu jest przy tym, nie? Przy jakimś obozie normalnie tu. Także to też ciekawe jest.
Nightreign, we saw this boss not in a Night Lord's arena. And that makes me wonder about this Gravity Dragon too, that we also know is another Night Lord, who in the original trailer was not in the Night Lord's arena. But we'll learn more about that boss in the coming weeks. Another bit of really interesting information came from IGN this week as well, when they were talking about their Raider coverage. Now, we had a full breakdown of Raider already, so that's nothing new, but there was an interesting point they mentioned in the transcript for their video. So take a look at this. Of all the classes I've played in Nightreign, the Raider is definitely the one that I've had the most fun with. It's the one that is most well suited for one-on-one battles, which is appropriate because its remembrances, we'll talk about those later on in the month, that have you fighting in one-on-one boss fights in a sort of gladiatorial arena, which is a nice change of pace.
O co chodzi? Jakie wizerunki, jakie walki w gladiatorskiej arenie 1 na 1? Co się dzieje? Nowy tryb w Nightrainie, nowy element gameplayowy? To jest mega ciekawe. I nie wiemy o tym nic.
So what does that mean? Upon first reading that, my mind immediately goes to boss rush, using the boss remembrances of bosses you've already beaten to go get practice or have an extra challenge. That's what...
Dobra, jeżeli Nightrain będzie dawał to, czego Elden Ring nigdy nie dawał, czyli boss rusze i to jeszcze z bossami z DS-ów, to ta gra sama w sobie będzie zajebista pod tym jednym kątem, w ogóle pomijając jakiekolwiek podejścia multiplayerowe. To by było giga dobre, bo umówmy się, Elden Ring ma mimo tych wszystkich reusów naprawdę kilka fajnych bossów. W Dark Soulsach też mamy całą masę fajnych bossów i czasami brakuje tej opcji jak w Sekiro, żeby można było się bić z jednym po drugim, po trzecim. I kurde, gdyby Nightrain nam to chociaż dawał, zawsze coś.
Have an extra challenge. That's what that sounds like to me. But another interesting point that some of you guys brought up was that this could mean some sort of final boss challenge at the end of the lore challenges for the characters, which do have you completing these sort of solo mini quests in order to unlock lore and the memories of the characters that you play as. Do those have some sort of final boss challenge at the end that is a quote-unquote remembrance boss? That sure sounds like a possibility to me. But whatever the case, they are...
To, co jest pewne, to to, że Nightrain wydaje się jednak głębszy niż się spodziewaliśmy. I to jest fajne, bo ja miałem naprawdę obawy, że to będzie dawało bardziej feeling po prostu moda do gierki, a z każdym materiałem, z każdym newsem mam wrażenie, że odchodzi od tego vibe'u i git.
Are confirming here that there is a sort of one-on-one boss challenge in Nightreign, beyond just simply solo queuing. But whatever that is, I guess we'll hear more about it in the coming weeks. So from people that got to play the extended Nightreign version at the From Software event, one of the rules they told us about was they were not allowed to play as Executor or Revenant. Now Executor was still on the character select screen, and we have some testimonials from people that hovered over the character to read the abilities. Now this is just word of mouth, but there were several people all saying the same thing, and I'm gonna be honest, this sounds crazy if true. Now this is translated from Japanese, so some of the words are going to be different. Executor's passive skill is gains an activation effect when recovering from a status abnormality. Now what exactly is that activation effect? Well, I don't know. But their standard ability is unsheathing the enchanted sword. You can deflect and nullify enemy attacks. Of course, we already knew about that when we've seen it in the trailers, but we had somebody in the last video saying it was the ultimate. Again, that wouldn't really make sense for them to show, and we had already seen the description of that accidentally leak on Bandai's website. The ultimate is apparently aspect of the Crucible, the beast, transform into a primordial beast. Now that sounds insane, but the question is, what beast is that going to...
Mowa o Cruciblach, mowa o tyglu, więc może będziemy mogli nagle jakimś takim połączonym aspektem tygla się bić podczas ulta, na przykład przez 15 sekund, zupełnie nowe ataki, umiejętności. Giga fajne by to było.
What exactly do you
Ale wydaje się dużo bardziej
into?
zaawansowana ta postać, nie?
Maybe a red bear from the DLC. Those don't really sound like primordial beast to me. I bet this is going to be something new entirely. But that sounds super cool. That's an ability that I feel fills that niche. That could fit really...
Tak, ta postać wydaje się mieć bardzo wysoki skill cap, tak jak ta czarodziejka, nie? Ze swoim łączeniem czarów. Mega spoko.
Well into Executor's playstyle. I'm sure you'll be invincible during that form, or at least taking damage will only shorten the time limit on it. And if that's the case, that would open up a lot of strategic possibilities aside from just dealing damage. But like I said, this is just word of mouth right now. We're still waiting on a full dedicated character trailer for Executor, which will probably be coming next week if we are getting it. But I'm ready to see it. This is my favorite character that we've seen so far, and I want to know how it plays. But just take that with a grain of salt until we get that trailer. Personally though, I hope it's true. So now we got a few developer interviews to take a look at, where Junya Ishizaki, the game's director, sat down with various gaming outlets to talk some more Elden Ring Nightreign details. Now, there's not a lot of new reveals here, but there's really interesting perspectives on the game that we haven't heard much of before. In the first one, we have PlayStation Blog, where he breaks down a lot of the game's design philosophy. And the first question asks, was there anything you gave particular attention to when creating Nightreign, and what were some of the challenges? To which Ishizaki responds, if I had to pick one aspect that we focused on the most, it would be combat.
I mega mnie to nie dziwi. Wiadomo, że Nightreign stawia na kombat i widać to pod każdym możliwym względem tej gierki, ale to, co jest zarąbiste, to to, że Junya Ishizaki był combat designerem w Dark Souls 3 i Bloodborne. I widać, że on wie, co jest 5 i chciał po prostu Elden Ringa jeszcze wynieść na nowy level tym.
The game's main goal is to defeat the Night Lord at the end of each night, and the elements that form the character builds in the world map are placed around the world to make the gameplay more compelling and to encourage players to be more strategic in their combat. In terms of a challenge, honestly, everything was a challenge, especially when it came to making major changes to the game mechanics. We had to make sure the game was still viable and truly enjoyable. We could have changed the mechanics without putting much thought into it, but there was a risk that the game would become something completely different, even though it was part of the Elden Ring universe. Finding the perfect balance between something that felt fresh and new, while still feeling true to Elden Ring was challenging.
To jest ciekawe. Czyli oni bardzo łatwo mogli zmienić ten kombat na coś zupełnie nowego, ale nie chcieli. To była świadoma decyzja, bo skoro to jest Elden Ring Nightreign, to chcesz to osadzić w uniwersum Elden Ringa, żeby było jakkolwiek sensowne. Szanuję to, bo jednak ma to być swego rodzaju, no nie wiem, czy można to nazwać spin-offem, no ale częścią uniwersum, w związku z czym movement postaci nie może być jakiś giga odklejony. Ale jednak i tak jest bardzo fajnie zrobiony. Wydaje się jakąś częścią Elden Ringa, może właśnie taką lekko zmodowaną, ale tak, nie odstaje bardzo.
Balance between something that felt fresh and new, while still feeling true to Elden Ring was challenging. And I think they absolutely nailed that balance. Now this next part is really interesting. The interviewer asks, after playing the network test, while I enjoyed building my characters, I also felt like the strategy aspect became a bit repetitive. Can we expect more unpredictability that encourages players to be more tactical in the final product? And Ishizaki responds, yes, we're also pursuing that approach. So the same strategy won't always work when fighting the bosses. Your initial strategy may be effective for a while, but the bosses will gradually evolve, and your tactics will no longer be viable, forcing you to rethink your approach.
Mega dobrze, są świadomi tego, że ta gra musi jakkolwiek zmieniać podejście do gracza, zmieniać poziom wyzwań, zmieniać różnorodność tych wyzwań, żebyśmy się nie przyzwyczaili, bo sorry, ale w teście technicznym, z uwagi na to, że to był test techniczny i miał pokazać przede wszystkim wytrzymałość serwerów, to mieliśmy tylko dwie mapy, dwa ustawienia mapy z losowymi przedmiotami. Te dwa ustawienia mapy w pewnym momencie tak rozkminiliśmy, że już dokładnie wiedzieliśmy, z którego obozu, do której ruiny, do którego kościoła Mariki chcemy pójść i nigdy nie było tam żadnej takiej niewiadomej. Wiedzieliśmy, że skoro lecimy z północy mapy, to w takim razie dobra, bierzemy, rabujemy obóz, idziemy na Loretę, szybko kilka leveli, pyk do kościoła po upgrade Estusa, wszystko było obcykane. A tak nie może być. Musimy za każdym razem na podejściu popatrzeć na mapę i powiedzieć, o kurde, co tu się dzieje, z której strony lecimy, okej, dobra, z tej, zupełnie innej, co robimy i opracowywać plan na bieżąco, żeby to te szybkie decyzje, ale i dobre decyzje były nagradzane najbardziej.
Also, in the final version of the game, you'll be able to determine the weakness of each boss before heading out. So if poison is effective against an upcoming boss, you may proactively search for and loot items that inflict poison more often in that run. Taking advantage of their
A to jest ciekawe.
susceptibility will give you an edge in the fights. We intentionally designed the game so that you'll need to adapt and evolve your strategies along with the changes that happen in the game. Okay, so big question mark there. What does that mean? The bosses will gradually evolve and your tactics will no longer be viable. Now, is that just talking about the Night Lords getting harder? It really doesn't sound like it. That sounds like there's more systems in play than simply difficulty scaling or just progressing to the next Night Lord. I mean, is there something that changes with the boss's AI to adapt to the skills that have been used to beat it? Or are there new modifiers that are going to appear on repeat runs, making certain things weak like bleed, for example, and amplifying other elemental buffs or weaknesses? Did it say that you'll be able to see the weakness before you go out on the hunt? So that sounds to me like that's going to be something that changes. Otherwise, what's the point? But I want to hear more about that. That sounds really interesting. And maybe they'll break that down more as the days go on. But the next question was equally fascinating. The interviewer asked if there were any changes made as a result of the network test, to which Ishizaki responded, during the network test, some players found it difficult to understand what elements were visible on the map, and said it was hard to identify next steps or how to use some of the character movesets. To address these issues, we made some changes so that information was conveyed more clearly to all the players. We also received a lot of helpful feedback regarding the difficulty. We made some adjustments to strike a balance that makes the game challenging as you progress, but still manageable. Gladius, one of the Night Lords, will also receive some updates, so players have that to look forward to in the final game. Now, it was pretty
Ty, Jezu, jak dobrze, nie posłuchali się recenzentów, Gladius będzie silniejszy, a nie słabszy. Jak dobrze, kurna. Ja pierdzielę. Jezu, Nightreign może będzie trudny. Tak.
much a resounding consensus that Gladius was a bit weak in the network test. I know personally, I queued with randoms every
Właśnie to nie było takie właśnie powszechne, jak Zajostorm mówi. Ja słyszałem wiele opinii, zwłaszcza z Polski idących, od niektórych recenzentów, od network testerów zwykłych i mówili, no generalnie trochę trudna jest ta gra. I my się tak z Kiszakiem śmialiśmy, że Jezu, oni to jeszcze znerfią, a my i tak przecież możecie zobaczyć na kanale, mieliśmy rany, gdzie tego bossa zabijaliśmy w 15 sekund. On miał zdecydowanie za mało HP i w niektórych atakach bił zdecydowanie za mało. Także cieszę się, że oni zauważyli to, co my mówiliśmy, a nie te głupoty, które wygadywali inni.
And every single time we got to him, we were able to beat him. And he was definitely weaker than even the Tree Sentinels or even the Demi-humans
Tak,
for that
Tree
matter.
Sentinele
So
były
I am
giga
glad we're going to
trudne.
be getting a buff to Gladius. I think he
I to
definitely
było
needs
dobre.
it. Another interview question I want to talk about came from the Japanese version of the PlayStation interview. And this one had a few extra questions, one of which was talking about the lore and the way we should look at it. The interviewer says, the setting of the game is in Limveld, a parallel world with a different worldview from the main Elden Ring game. I understand that this decision was made out of respect for the feelings of the main game players about the story, but conversely, are there any elements that only main game players will notice? Excellent question, by the way. We need more interviewers asking stuff like this. But the director answers, first of all, I would like to make it clear that the hidden elements and hidden scenarios of the main story will not be revealed in Nightreign.
Okay.
However, there are parts that express what if, such as what we were aiming for is depicted in a different form of drama, or what if there is a different history. There may be some parts that will make you smile if you already know the facts, such as did this and that meet and become like this, or did they combine to become like this? So yeah, typical spin-off scenario there, but
No
there
dobra,
are
czyli standardowy spin-off, nie mamy tego traktować jak nieodłączną część lore'u Elden Ringa, ale będzie nam zadawało dużo pytań, co by było gdyby. Natomiast to, co mnie ciekawi, to to, jak tutaj wprost zostało powiedziane, chcę, żeby było jasne, że żadne ukryte elementy i scenariusze z głównej historii nie będą ujawnione w Nightrainie. Ja wiem, że idę trochę za daleko, ale czy to oznacza, że zostaną ujawnione gdziekolwiek indziej? Czyżby? Może? Kiedyś?
or did they combine to become like this? So yeah, typical spin-off scenario there, but there are going to be obviously a lot of callbacks, and I really want to know what he's referencing with that final line. I definitely would have liked to have some sort of answers, especially to the more obtuse part of the lore back in the base game that was clearly never going to be expanded upon, like the Lord of Night, for example. But again, our only lens to view this through
Ja
is
nie chcę nic mówić, ale Elden Ring ma tyle potencjalnych możliwości spin-offowych i to takich kanonicznych. Gloomite Queen, sama historia Radagona i Mariki trochę bardziej rozwinięta, Badlandsy Horalu, sam jego ten marsz zmatowionych, ja pierdzielę, jest Godwyn, jest tyle części tej fabuły, które można by było na spokojnie przedstawić jako Elden Ring 2 czy cokolwiek Elden Ringo podobnego, że ja pierdzielę, muszą to kiedyś zrobić. Niech sobie czekają ile chcą, ale kiedyś muszą.
an alternate history, but it'll still be fun to figure out. Now, the final thing I want to talk about today is the new Kadokawa report. Now, I'll go ahead and let you know there is no new information here, but it is always good to look at these just to see how From Software is doing, how the company is performing, and so on. Under other circumstances where we didn't already know From Software's next projects years in advance right now, we would be predicting things. But since we've already had a trailer for their game coming in 2026, there's really no room for speculation. So we'll move through this pretty quickly. Starting off with the fiscal year forecast, even with a forecast of declining sales and profit from 2024, due largely to Elden Ring and DLC, they're aiming to achieve business results that exceed the forecast with the new hit titles and expanded sales of past titles, citing of course Nightreign and Elden Ring Tarnished Edition. And even though Tarnished Edition is just a few armor and weapons, it's definitely going to boost sales just because of how good Elden Ring is in general, and it's
O, wiecie co, ten Tarnished Edition okazuje się być dużo większy niż myśleliśmy. Przecież ostatnio z tymi newsami się okazało, że nawet nowe klasy startowe mogą mieć miejsce w Tarnished Edition. Co ciekawe, niektórzy dopatrują się, że jakaś klasa startowa może mieć Milady, broń z DLC-ka. Brzmi to odklejenie, ale oj, tam może trochę nowości być.
first time on the Switch too. They also still continue to say that From Software is steadily progressing to establish their own in-house publishing, even though they've been saying that for years, but we have yet to see it truly materialize. They're still working with Bandai Namco, and now they're working with Nintendo. The question I'm wondering is what's it going to look like for their next major Souls-like game? We'll just have to wait and see. The next thing I want to take a look at is where it says expanding the game pipeline over there on the right. On the last page they mentioned that under the umbrella of Kadokawa they do have a total of 26 games under development. Now you can see there that 21 of those are by Gacha Games and Acquire, leaving 5 between Spike Chunsoft and From Software. Now we know From Software is also working on Nightreign and the Duskbloods, but they're definitely also working on their next major Souls-like. Again, no room for predictability here because we already know what their next game is, but again, there's just some numbers to it. And the final part of this I want to take a look at is there in promoting expansion of IP
Uh-huh.
in games. They do continue to talk about animation, extending the life of IPs, and expanding additional contents in games. We're still waiting to hear more about that Sekiro anime. If there actually is an Elden Ring movie happening, I know there was a fake story that came out yesterday that was not true, but George Martin continues to say that there is one. We're just gonna have to wait and see what happens with that. And
No nawet przecieki były, że grupa A24 z reżyserem Alexem Garlandem ma robić film Elden Ringa. No byłoby fajnie. Coś czuję, że ten film będzie gówniany, ale byłoby fajnie zobaczyć, jak im to pójdzie.
especially after their partnership with Sony. It's gonna happen, it's just a matter of time. But yeah, like I said, nothing really new there. The business continues to be in good standing, numbers are looking good, and they're generally positive about the future. Like I said, if we didn't already know what's coming next, we could speculate about this a lot more, look at these numbers more scrupulously, but since we already know the Duskbloods is happening in 2026, there's no point until the next fiscal year. But there you have it. But that is all the new information we got just for the second half of this week. It's a lot. It's going to continue to be a lot. It's going to become even more. And it's
Oj, dużo rzeczy się dowiemy, zwłaszcza, że IGN ma w tym miesiącu dużo materiałów Nightreinowych wypuścić i między innymi o co chodzi z tą areną gladiatorów. Kurde, co to jest? Widzowie z YouTube'a, dajcie znać, co wy o tym myślicie. To były newsy Nightreinowe, jak jakiekolwiek jeszcze się pojawią, to oczywiście będę tutaj nagrywał na bieżąco.